Welcome to Light in the Shadow. I'm Dana Kenyon, and it's my aim to encourage, support, and equip women to live life under the shadow of God's wing. On this channel, I'll be bringing you videos of women who are doing just that. I hope their stories will help you find your path in His kingdom. Under His shadow is where we can walk in His protection, receive His provision, and rest in His care. Together, we will be light under the shadow of His wing. Okay. Welcome to Light in the Shadow. Today we are interviewing Brittany Wilson. A lot of years ago, I attended church in a tiny little Wyoming town. And one day, this cute little family came walking into our church. The man was a big, burly, red-haired guy. And his wife was just the sweetest blonde-haired woman you've ever seen. And they had one child at that time. I don't remember if she was pregnant or not at that time, but they had just one, their firstborn, Caleb. They have been dear friends of mine for all these years. And Brittany is now married to that one child that they had, Caleb. She is married to Caleb, and they have three darling little girls. So we're going to talk to her a little bit today. Thank you for coming on, Brittany. First of all, just tell me how you guys met.
Yeah, so Caleb and I met when I was 17. He was 18. He had just graduated high school. We both grew up in the church, and mission trips during the summer were something that we both were very accustomed to. So we were actually in San Diego on a World Changers mission trip. And we both, I think, were well known within our youth groups for being the flirty individuals. And I remember my youth minister saying, "This will never last." And I told him it will. He's the one. And turned out he very much so was.
Well, very good. And so you were 17 then, you said?
Yes.
But okay, so things that you didn't always stay together.
We did not. So yeah, we had a few years of just chaos. We were 17 when we met. I was a senior in high school. Shortly after my graduation, Caleb joined the United States Coast Guard in June of 2010, and he was then stationed in New Orleans. I then went and joined a sorority at the University of New Mexico, and it was just very, very hard to find time to see each other, in all honesty. Like, between his duty schedule and sorority events, it just felt like we could never meet up. And I always said, "I just want you to take me to the movies on a Tuesday." And he said, "Well, I'll fly in on Tuesday morning." And I said, "That's not what I want. I want you to be here every day." And that obviously there is no water in New Mexico that he could be on. So we were no, very landlocked. We wrestled with that for a while.
Okay.
But then in October of 2012, we got back together.
I see. Okay. That's important. I always thought it was interesting that Caleb went to the Coast Guard because he was a Wyoming boy. And you want to talk about landlocked. So right. I thought that was funny. And his younger brother Seth now is in the Coast Guard as well. So I just thought that was funny. So okay, so you're dating and you're trying to work through things, and things are going along pretty good, but then a tragedy struck. And so tell us what happened to Caleb.
November 10th of 2012, Caleb was in a diving accident. He was off duty. They don't know if he ever hit the ground or if it was just his weight. He's 6'1" standing, so his weight and height coming over his body. But he shattered his C6, which is the little lump on your neck, through T1, which is right below that, which caused him to be a quadriplegic. I was in Albuquerque celebrating my 21st birthday at a dinner with family. And I got a call and it said LA was calling. And I thought, oh, Hollywood's calling. I even made a fun remark about that. Turns out Louisiana is LA.
Yes, not LA.
And not LA. Hollywood
Not
was
LA,
not
LA.
calling. They told me that he had been in an accident and they were happy he was talking, but that was all they could tell me at that point because I was not his wife and I was not privy to that type of information.
Oh man, that had to have been very difficult. So then what? I mean, you find out that he's now injured his neck, and so how did you get together again then?
So all night long, Matt and Annette were on the phone. He was taken into surgery to remove the shattered bone shards, and it was supposed to be a 2-hour surgery, turned into a 5-hour surgery. I think I can speak for all three of us in that situation, except for Caleb. I can honestly say we did not have a full night's sleep for several months after that because you're just in fear. So I got on a flight Sunday afternoon. I was a broke college kid. So actually through my college class at my church, they put money towards it. My grandma put money towards my flight ticket because buying a flight the same day is not cheap.
No.
Our pastor put money towards my ticket and everybody got me on this flight to New Orleans.
Oh my goodness, group venture.
Yes.
Support system, which would prove to be very valuable. So you talked about Matt and Annette, Caleb's parents, and I just wanted to mention that I always kind of considered that one word, Matt and Annette.
Yes. They go together. They really do.
They do, and they are the epitome of one flesh joined together in marriage. Yeah. And so they hightailed it down to Louisiana as soon as they could, and they were there for him. There is a picture that Caleb's sister Katie took just shortly after, and I don't know how long after the injury, of Caleb in his wheelchair, and he's leaning back onto Matt's lap, which is a good size lap to lean back on in more ways than one. And every time I see that picture, and Annette posted it just the other day, every time I see that picture, it makes me cry, for one thing, but it also is just such a good depiction of a father's love for his son. Here is Caleb now, this young man who had a career in front of him in the Coast Guard, and it's not looking like that's going to happen anymore. So here were his parents, so concerned for their son, and you get there and you're by yourself. You don't have anybody there with you. They had to scrape together money just for you to get there. How did it make you feel? Did you feel like you were actually part of the situation?
I did. From the moment I got there, Caleb, and I think anybody in the room would have agreed that there was this bond. He's laying in this hospital bed, unable to move anything from, at that time, it was shoulders down. But he lit up and was so happy and surprised that I was there. He honestly said, I didn't think you would come. And I said, why would I not? Like, where else would I be right now? And every conversation, every decision, there were 4 of us in the room for every single one of that. Wow. Caleb, his parents, and me, which again, I was not privy to so much of that information, but Caleb made sure that I was a part of it. Matt and Annette made sure that I was fed, that I was clothed. I mean, she did my laundry for me while we were staying at the hospital. Like it was a very intimate unit of 4 that was going through this very tragic and different situation. I mean, this situation is something I always say, it's one of those things that you hear about, right? You hear somebody's going to go through something traumatic and it's, oh, I feel so bad for them. Well, all of a sudden we were them. We were going through this traumatic thing. And I mean, there was a moment in the hospital where Caleb, every time he would sit up, he would get sick to his stomach. He was having blood pressure issues. It would cause him to throw up. I cannot handle bodily fluids. I have 3 children and I still don't handle it well. And so he yelled at me to get out of the room. And it was, I mean, this shaking, like chaos. Matt's trying to help Caleb. I'm trying to get out of the room. And Annette just stood in the hallway holding me as I cried. And whether it was tears because he yelled at me or tears because all of a sudden you're again in this traumatic situation and everything was falling apart and all we had was each other.
Yeah, just the 4 of you. When we were talking, you said that Caleb needed a dad, but you needed a mom, and they were both there to fill those roles, as so typical of them. So Matt has always been a direct person, very direct, and you talked about how Matt wanted to protect Caleb and you, for that matter, from dragging out a relationship just for the sake of looks. So tell us about the conversation and how you responded to that.
So shortly after we had been at Craig Hospital, it's they have this conversation within 2 weeks. Craig Hospital is the spinal cord recovery hospital in Denver. And through a series of testing and just also knowledge, you know, they focus on this. We had a meeting with his team, his PT, his doctor was all there, and it was stated that he had a 30% chance of ever walking again, though they do not see it likely. And in that same evening, Matt pulled Caleb and I aside and had this very tough conversation of, if you're going to leave, if this doesn't feel like something you can handle, then I would rather you leave now, as to not drag out the pain for both yourself and Caleb. And at 21, I thought, how dare this person question my integrity, my love for this man? Like, all of these thoughts went through my head. 9 years later, I can sit here and say, I am so thankful that somebody asked me the questions, that somebody was willing to just ask, do you want to stay? Because for a lot of women and men in this situation, it is just assumed that you are going to stay. It is assumed that you will be a part of this journey. But I was 21 and this is a very big hurdle to take on. And he was willing to ask and accept whatever answer came at. If I would have said I'm leaving, Matt would have said, and I understand and respect that. And I said, no, I'm staying. And he said, then we're going to do this together. Again, going back to, there were 4 of us in every meeting. There were 4 of us in every conversation. And even when it came, I mean, at one point, Matt had considered taking Caleb back to Wyoming. I say taking like he's a child, but in some ways, I mean, this was his child going through this traumatic thing. And Caleb and I and Matt and Annette sat down and said, you know, we don't want to live in Wyoming. That is not the plan. And so instead they helped us find a home that was accessible and that we could, I mean, there were 4 of us making every decision.
That's nice. That's nice.
It's hard enough to grow up, but it's really hard to grow up overnight and in the midst of a spinal cord injury.
Yes. Yeah, it's one of those things that the Lord uses, you know, to help us to grow in him. So Brittany, how was your relationship with God at this point?
At the time, I thought it was still good. I thought I'm praying. What I didn't realize was I was only praying for the Lord to heal Caleb. I was begging and pleading with him, in some ways, probably bargaining too, but I wasn't seeking his face. I wasn't seeking his plan. I could only imagine a future with Caleb walking again. And that was the only answer that he could have given me.
Yeah. The only scenario that you were comfortable with was Caleb walking again, period.
Completely. Yes.
In fact, you even talked about the goal that you had. And you said that it was even Caleb's goal, but what was this goal?
Yeah. So the first night that he got to Craig Hospital and his PT comes in and everybody's checking him over and having, conversation of what are your goals while you're here? And Caleb said to walk her down the aisle. And that was the only option that was going to work, was for him to walk me down the aisle.
You knew that God had answered your prayers and that
Right.
there was success because Caleb would walk you down the aisle. And that kind of happened, but let's stay back at this point. You said you had like 5 years of just this back and forth. God, you need to heal Caleb. And that's a difficult place to be. So Caleb, during this time, I mean, you two obviously got married, but he was very concerned about you at this point as well. And you told me that he said he didn't want you to be his caregiver. What was the difference between being a caregiver and what he had in mind?
Caleb has always and will always be the most selfless man in the world. He got that from his father.
Mm-hmm.
And he, to this day, one of our running jokes is, I will ask for water as soon as he transfers into bed and he will get up and get it for me. And I think that, the man is in a wheelchair and he will transfer back out of bed and get it for me. And that was the difference for him, was he did not want me to be a nurse. He didn't want me to be, there are some very intimate things that take place following a spinal cord injury. And he wanted that boundary to stay up so that we could still be husband and wife, so that he could still be this selfless man that wanted to serve me the way that he saw his mother being served and loved on growing up. And he pushed very, very hard for that. We had a caregiver for the first few months when we got out of the hospital to help with that boundary. And she went on a vacation back home and it was supposed to be like 2 weeks and she just never came back. And so Caleb quickly learned how to do all of these things by himself. He would do the laundry. He would, we had the puppy, which we still have, and he would take Chuck out for a walk multiple times a day. And he pushed very, very hard to become independent, not for himself though. And that is that selfless, loving nature. He pushed because he loves me so deeply that he wanted me to have whatever sense of normal this life was going to be.
Yes. And part of that was walking you down the aisle. How long after the accident were you two married?
1.5 years.
1.5 years. Okay. So you're like not even in the middle of this 5 years yet when you get married. Did Caleb walk you down the aisle?
In theory, he did. Was he standing and moving in an upward position? Yes. Would it be walking that we would call it? No. If I could do it all over again, I would have him in his chair because that is our reality. But I was, again, pleading with the Lord, and I was going to make normal what I thought was normal, right? A husband and a wife standing at the end of the aisle together and then walking back up that aisle hand in hand. I was going to make this happen If the Lord was not going to heal him completely, then I was going to use everything at my disposal to get him to stand up and walk.
Yes. Yeah. Artificial or whatever. But
Exactly. He had braces and a walker and not very good balance and almost fell countless times, but he did it
he did it because he loves you.
because he loves me.
Yes. You're a fortunate woman. Okay. So let's see here. I also wanted to talk about acceptance, because we're just talking about this whole reality that he didn't really walk down the aisle. The reality was that there was no fairy tale life. This wasn't a Hallmark movie. And the physical therapist told you one day that he wasn't going to walk again. How did that news go over?
Not well. It actually just showed up in my Facebook memories of that night 9 years ago. And I had said, we serve a big God and he is going to walk again. And the truth is, we do serve a big God, but that does not mean that we are going to get all of our wishes and our dreams and our hopes and desires, because we also live in a fallen and broken world. And so coming to the reality that life is not a fairy tale, that these dreams that you may have, the Lord does not have to say yes. And there is grace and mercy in his no's, because he knows that even in no's, it's going to be a really hard time and a hard time of acceptance. And I was so blessed in that season to have a husband, boyfriend, fiance, he was all those things at different seasons of this, who compartmentalized it and knew that the Lord was still going to use this for his glory.
Yeah.
So even when I was angry, he was okay. And I think that honestly was the greatest blessing to come out of all of this.
Yeah.
Because he could walk beside me. Well, sit beside me.
Yes. Yeah. Fairy tale doesn't exist. Reality is reality. And you said that you wouldn't have asked him to walk you down the aisle if you had it to do over again. And then years later, when you have one of your little girls, you shared another incident with me that really kind of brought this to reality for you. Tell me how Ellie responded to the putting the star on the Christmas tree.
Yeah. So for 5 years, I believe, maybe it's only 4 years, I had made Caleb put on all the braces, stand up with his walker, almost fall, almost knock down the Christmas tree, but he would put the star up on the Christmas tree because that's what you were supposed to do. The man of the house was supposed to put the star on the tree. And it was Ellie's second Christmas, and he went to do it all, and she panicked. She was just shy of a year, or just over a year. And this man that she had only ever known seated was all of a sudden 6'1", standing over her. And she was in complete fear. And all I could think was, that is not her reality. She has never known her dad standing up. And her day-to-day life will not be with him standing up. And it was in that moment that I realized that I cannot force reality. I cannot force him to walk when that's not what the Lord has determined. Yeah. And it is okay to begin accepting that he was going to live his life in a wheelchair.
Yes, that's God, and that's healing, and that's good. So with the 5 years of you being angry at God, and he just wasn't cooperating with you, you told me about an incident where you became aware of the fact that your relationship with God was estranged. Tell us about that.
Yeah. So it was a month after we had this dream beautiful wedding. Um, and you would have thought that I would have just been in awe of the Lord for, allowing Caleb not to fall in this forced walking that I made happen. But instead, I went to Beth Moore with my grandma, cousin, and aunt, and they were so excited. And they were so excited to spend a weekend in worship with the Lord, hearing his word. And I sat in the audience, arms crossed, and just this hardened heart of, I can't worship you because he's still not walking. And Lord, that's all I want is him to walk. And it was the beginning of this very long healing process. I mean, I think people, they expect this Damascus road of you're going to wake up one day and the scales are going to fall away and you're just going to be in awe and worship of the Lord. And that does happen sometimes. But other times, and probably more often than not, it is a slow peeling away of the scales. It is slowly the Lord softening your heart so that he can be glorified in whatever situation you're in. And so it was from that day, I began to see that there needed to be healing. I began to realize that we had been in Colorado for a year and a half and we had yet to find a church home. There were all of these things that I knew I wanted and I needed. So in October of 2014, as I'm still fighting with the Lord, but knowing that he's softening my heart, I had heard this pastor on Caleb. I knew he was where I wanted to go. I walked into that church Sunday morning by myself because Caleb was homesick, and that church had blue carpet and pews, and my church home in Albuquerque had blue carpet and pews. And it was something so simple, but the Lord was gracious enough to give me those aesthetic things, those physical things, so that I would feel comfortable enough to begin to continue to work on that healing, to find a church body that would welcome me in.
So you got your blue carpet and your blue pews, maybe to feel a little bit more like home. And so you joyfully sat in the pew and listened to the pastor preach.
Oh, it was far from joyful. It was this, I wept. I truly wept through the entire service. It was weeping of, I think, both sadness, anger, and just honestly some shame that I had spent the last 5 years so distant from the Lord, that I had spent this time growing away from him because I was mad, and how selfish that, I mean, I've seen so many other people have it worse off, but I think that's also the grace of the Lord, right? Is he's not sitting there saying, but look at this other person.
Right.
He's meeting me right where I am.
Mm-hmm.
And he's listening to my sadness. And so my heart wept for everything that was and wasn't. I mean, at that point, we were trying to get pregnant with Ellie. There was the reality of the wheelchair still very much so sinking in. There was all of this buildup that finally just needed to come out, and the only place it could go to was the Lord.
Yes. And he is gracious to receive us during those times. I love it. I love it. So you're in Denver, which was about 4 hours away from where Matt and Annette lived. And so what was their involvement, I guess, in your life during that time?
I have always called them my safety net. I have said that they let us pretend to be adults, right? Like we were 4 hours away, but if anything happened, Matt was there in 4 hours. He would drop anything. And I mean, there were times that he left Douglas, Wyoming at 9 p.m., got there closer to midnight, and helped us with whatever it was, turned around so he could make it to church on Sunday morning.
Oh my goodness.
He and Annette were our backbone. They let us feel like we could do anything because they were there to catch us if we needed to. It was a 4-person family.
Yeah. Yep. You talked about even having a stronger bond, maybe than some of the other kids in the family. Not that he loves you more, but just that reliance, I guess, and that knowledge that whatever you needed, they would be there. And that's a pretty special relationship. So you were living in Denver, and when Caleb got done with his physical therapy at Craig Hospital, then what? You stayed in Denver for a while, right?
We did for 5 years. It was, the safety net of having Matt and Annette close was obviously so nice. My family was in Albuquerque, or is in Albuquerque, so that was very nice. But there was always this longing for what was next, where it never felt like home, because we were always looking for the next place to go. And the Lord put Illinois on our heart. Caleb had been coming out here for, he's involved with a foundation, Oscar Mike, and I came out here with him, and we knew this is where the Lord was calling us. And I think through the Lord calling us here, he at the same time was working on Matt and Annette's hearts to move them out of Wyoming. And though we were both in talks at the same time, there was never this conversation of, well, if you move, what does that look like? Or if we move, what does that look like? And it happened within 9 months of each other. We moved to Illinois, and Matt and Annette moved to Alaska. And I truly believe that the Lord moved us not only for the great community we have out here, but to allow Matt and Annette to see that next chapter of their life, to truly, be these empty nesters that can adventure and do all the things that they didn't get to do, either because they were raising children or because they went through this tragic accident with us.
Yeah. So tell me about Oscar Mike. What is that? What does it allow for Caleb?
Yeah, so Oscar Mike is a nonprofit that was founded by a Marine veteran who is also a spinal cord injury survivor. He has created this great foundation where you come out and you spend a week at this house that he bought with 12 other injured veterans, and you do all of these crazy things. You go skydiving, you drive a UTV, you do all of these adrenaline junkie things, because most of these guys are adrenaline junkies. And then at the end of it, you have this family dinner, and you sit down and you talk about those intimate things that only somebody else with a spinal cord injury can relate to.
Yeah.
But you also talk about your time in the service and that loss, because that is a loss, and you have to grieve this idea and this dream you had. So Caleb came out and did that week long, and he came back this man that I had known before the injury. He was excited and he was passionate, and he began playing wheelchair rugby. So he plays for the Oscar Mike militia, and we spend way too much of our time traveling around the United States with wheelchair rugby, but we love every minute of it, because for 3 days a week, once a month, we are with other people just like us. And it is such a blessing.
Oh, that's amazing. What does Oscar Mike stand for?
On the move. So it's military jargon for on the move.
Okay. Oscar Mike. And these guys are on the move and so it sounds like they're healing emotionally from the tragedy of their lives through this program. Sounds like a fantastic program. We're going to put some information up about Oscar Mike at the end of the program today. So thanks for sharing about that with us. I hope that our listeners will be able to look into that a little bit and support that ministry. Okay, well, you now are living in Illinois, and you are a recruiter. What is a recruiter? You're not a military recruiter.
No. So I am a recruiter for an accounting firm out of Florida. The Lord has just been very faithful to keep connections in my life and open doors at the right time. We now have 3 little girls. I mean, I remember when I so not patiently pleaded with the Lord for one, and he just has continued to bless us by growing our family and opening doors and giving Caleb, Oscar, Mike. I mean, through tragedy, our life may look so much different than what I had planned, but it is also so much better than I could have ever imagined.
So you've seen a huge difference between the fairy tale life and reality. And you've seen God bring you through so much together. How would you consider your relationship with God right now?
I am in the best place with the Lord that I've ever been in my life, and it's continuing. It's a relationship, so it's growing and evolving at all times. As I grow and evolve, my relationship with the Lord grows and evolves, and it's a very intimate thing, and I love that.
Amen. Amen. And he's given you so much. He's blessed you in so many ways. Has he given you a verse or a passage of scripture that you cling to?
He has. So Proverbs 16:9, the heart of man plans his way, but the Lord establishes his step. And it was when we were trying to actually get pregnant with our oldest that this verse began to just fill my heart. And now it's come up time and time and time again. And it's so true. I mean, we can have all the plans in the world, but he will determine our steps. And if you surrender that to him, it all will be okay.
Oh, amen. Amen. Hey, thank you so much for sharing about this. What a difficult story through a spinal cord injury and just all of the things that you have been through. God has definitely blessed you. I can see that on your face. I can hear that in your voice. Like I said, we're going to post some information about Oscar Mike at the end of the program, but I am just so proud of you and Caleb and love to see what God is doing in your lives. So God bless you and keep you.
Thank you so much for having me.
We talked about Oscar Mike during the interview with Brittany. You can check them out at www.oscarmike.org. This foundation makes it possible for injured veterans to stay on the move through adaptive sports. On their site, you can make donations to the foundation, and you can also purchase clothing, outerwear, and other gear to help spread the word about Oscar Mike. Check it out. Thanks for watching today's episode of Light in the Shadow. Be sure to subscribe to this channel so that you can watch future videos. God bless.